In our previous session, we discussed how important it is for a child to be seen, soothed, feel safe, and have that secure attachment with a significant adult. Episode 3 is about encouraging language development while children are at home. We're going to be speaking about communication. When you think about the communication that you have with your child or your children, generally we're having an interaction or a conversation between two, or we're passing along information or receiving information from our child or children. Conversation is what happens in the space between the child and the person they are conversing with. In this case, you. I'd like to talk about the stages of language development, and you may recognize some of these as we go through it. The first stage of development is the discoverer stage. This is the point between birth and a few months of age when the child starts to recognize the parent or the other adults in their environment and starts to go beyond themselves. The communicator is the next stage where a child starts to interact with other people in the environment. The next stage are the first words users, where a child starts to imitate the words parents are using. They also start to use single words to achieve their goals. Once they start to develop a vocabulary, you will see a child starting to combine words, phrases of 2 or more words that make sense to them. Then we begin to use sentences, 3 to 5 word sentences that start to make sense grammatically with some kind of rules that we have attributed to them. Later sentence users start to use not only more complex sentences, but strings of sentences, paragraphs, and longer forms of communication. So I'd like you to think about your child or your children. Which language stage is that child or are your children at? How can we encourage their language development? I'm going to go through some ideas of some strategies that you can use. They're probably things that you already do, but maybe you don't do deliberately yet. We're going to build off of our previous episode in talking about following the child's lead. While we do this, we're going to make sure that our children are seen during our conversations. The first strategy I'm going to share with you is the OWL strategy, or OWL. The O stands for observe, the W for wait, and the L for listen. When we observe a child, we're observing for the child's interest and what the child is telling you. So we're paying very close attention to those pieces. Waiting is sometimes the most difficult thing to do, but we wait expectantly for the child to initiate where possible and get involved in the activity. And then we try very carefully to listen. We listen for the child's complete message. We listen not only to their words, but their tone of voice, their facial expression, and their body language. That way we can make sure that they are truly seen. OWL is a very important acronym to put in your toolbox. This one seems a little bit funny to be discussing, but I can't tell you how many times I've realized, both as a teacher and as a parent, that just because I'm taller, I end up talking down toward my child. So this strategy is called Be Face to Face. In order for a child to be truly seen, we need to see them and have them see us. So this is just a reminder that when we're having a conversation with our children, we need to be at their level, at the height that they are at that moment. As we're having conversations with our children, I'd like us to think a little bit about the types of things that we do. The most apparent thing that we do is we reflect facial expressions. If someone is smiling at us, we smile back. If our child is sad, we will echo that with our face and give them a sad expression as well. Or if a child is joyful, we can't help but be joyful with them. Other ways that we reflect are actions and gestures. If a child is pointing, we follow with our eyes where they're pointing to. If a child waves at us or if someone waves at us, we wave back. And don't even get me started about blowing kisses. We often reflect sounds. If you think especially when babies are first starting to notice us, when they start to coo or make baby noises, we will coo back to them. We also reflect words. As children start to imitate our words, we reflect those words back to them and get them to try and repeat them again. And then we reflect on sentences. As a grandmother, for instance, my grandson might come in to me and say, "Grandma, I caught a frog." and the first thing that I say is, "What? You caught a frog?" I'm reflecting. In addition to reflecting, we interpret. And interpreting is really important when we're in those early stages of language development. If you have a discoverer who's using gestures to indicate what they need, we want to give meaning to that message. So we might say to them, "You want to be picked up? Let me pick you up." Or, "You would like your bottle? Let me give you your bottle." If we have a communicator, then we say it as if he would if he could. So we might say, "Oh, you're asking me for a drink? Let mommy get you a drink." This next stage, the first words user, we say it as he would if he could until he can say it by himself, but we give the full expression, and sometimes we might even give him the words to say. So we might say, "Oh, you would like your drink? Say, 'Drink, please.'" I'd like to speak a little bit then about how we interact and some ways that we might interact more deeply with our children. Sometimes we ask a question. In asking that question, we sometimes will elicit a response, but sometimes we can also shut down the conversation, as in this example where the adult is saying, "What are you doing, Sarah?" And Sarah looks at the adult like, "What does it look like I'm doing?" Another thing we might do is we might instruct. Now, instructing is great. However, sometimes when we instruct, we're not necessarily following the child's lead. So this adult is instructing the child, saying, "Wash your hair on this side now." So the adult is not only leading the conversation, but leading the play. And you can see what possibly might be going on in Sarah's head. "I don't want to wash that side." Something that we might think about, though, is instead of asking a question or giving an instruction, what if we were to make a comment? Here's the example. "Your doll's going to have such clean hair." Opens up the space so that Sarah can add her comment. "Her look pretty." As we are thinking about these conversations in terms of moving children from one stage to the next, for example, moving a communicator to the stage of combiner to the stage of an early sentence user, what we might want to do is give them the next stage. So when the communicator is banging the drum, we might give the words for banging, like boom, boom, boom. A combiner, we might add more words to the sentence. They're the words that they use. Boom, boom, look, you're banging the drum. Or the early sentence user, give them a more complex sentence. "Wow, you're really a good drummer. You could be in a band." Then, of course, always thinking about building their vocabulary from where they are to where they will go next. So in this short episode, we've talked about following the child's lead. We've talked about the OWL strategy, observe, wait, and listen. We've also talked about the need to be face-to-face so children can be truly seen. We've talked about the way that we can reflect what our children are saying, the way that we can interpret and extend, and the way that we can engage conversations through asking questions, giving instructions, and even better, making a comment. The next episode we will share together will be talking about the importance of play. Thank you for listening.